is just to go through the SRP for Year 10 this year. These documents will be uploaded to Canvas, and you'll also get a paper copy. Okay, so the SRP this year has three major parts, and we'll just go through them. Okay, so the first bit is the research proposal. That's due in week 2, and that's done in class, and that'll be in your logbook. I'll talk about that shortly. Basically, what will happen is you will come up with a design for an experiment. You'll submit a plan to your teacher in your logbook, and you'll get some feedback on that. And once you've gotten some feedback on that, that's your signal that you're approved to start that experiment. And then what will happen is you'll gather the materials from home and bring those to school in week 4, and you'll conduct your experiment during science classes during week 4. So during that week, you'll conduct your experiments, do your write-up, record information in your logbook, and then after week 4, you'll work on your formal report, which you'll put together and submit via Canvas, as well as your logbook as well. So I'll take you to the logbook in a moment, but I'll just go through this first. Okay, so if you read through the document, it just takes you through what's required for your SRP, outlines the task, and gives you some ideas about what you could potentially do for your SRP. I'm sure you'll be able to think of other ones. In terms of doing them, you'll have to negotiate with your teacher and keep a record in your logbook about what you plan to do, and get feedback on that to see if it's feasible to do. Okay, so it's important that the experiments you do, they don't cause harm to people or animals, and are feasible to do in the lab here at the college, or we take some adequate safety measures to make sure that these experiments can go ahead safely. Plants is not allowed because that was in Year 8. This goes through basically what's required for your design and planning. I'll let you read that. I'll let you read the important points for planning. At the end of the planning phase in week 2, you'll submit your logbook to your teacher, and your teacher will give you some feedback, and they'll also approve your experimental design or your method, if you like, to say that it's okay to go ahead so you can start preparing the materials. So part B is the actual investigation that will happen in class. You will be required to bring materials that you need. You won't be able to request chemicals or anything like that from the lab staff. You'll have to design an experiment where you can actually aggregate materials. You will be allowed to use Bunsen burners and glassware, things like that. That is freely available in the lab. We'll provide those to you if they're available in the lab. There's no problem. And your teacher will talk to you about that and go through that with you in more detail, depending on your experimental design. And then part C is your actual write-up, and your write-up is written up following the marking criteria, which isn't published yet, but will be shortly, and you'll need to present your scientific research as a poster. However, you use the poster template and submit it via Canvas, so you don't have to actually make a physical poster, but you are required to follow the template, and that will be provided to you as well, which is this link here. So you can do that as well. Okay, so that basically takes you through, I think, the basics of the task. You are required to do your parent guardian consent form. This needs to be submitted to your class teacher before week 2, and your teacher will mark you off, and that just means that your parents know that you're going to be conducting an SRP, an experiment at school, for assessment purposes. It also just signals to them that if you're mucking around at home, grabbing some things out of the cupboard, that they know what's going on there and what it's about. So that's got to be submitted to your teacher before week 2 so you can carry on with the experiment. So that's the document for the assessment task. I'll just show you now the document for the logbook. So what you're going to get is a logbook that looks something like this. So you've got space here to write things. My suggestion for the logbook is that you date your work, and every time you make an entry into the logbook, you just provide the date. So on the second page here, you've actually got your proposal and research scaffold, and you'll see up here at the very top, once you've considered all these things here, and you'll handwrite just into these boxes around what you're studying, your teacher will mark it as approved, yes or no. Now, if it's marked as approved no, that means it'll be given back to you, and you'll have to make some adjustments to your design so that your teacher will approve it. So once it's approved, your teacher will cross that out, circle the yes, and you'll be right to go. Your teacher will keep a record of who's approved and who isn't. They'll also photocopy this page, so they've got a record of who's doing what. Along with that, there is our feedback rubric here. So your teacher will give you some feedback on what you've done so far, and that'll help you think ahead to writing the research report, and also think ahead to what you need to record and what you need to do and what you need to be aware of as you're conducting the experiment. Okay. Once you've conducted the experiment, or while you're conducting the experiment, you'll be expected that you keep recording things in your notebook, perhaps. You would do diagrams and any thoughts, ideas, and observations as you go. We've left you about 10 pages there, so you can use as much or as little of that as you like, but it will be marked on the final turn-in, so be aware of that. On pages 10 and 11, there is just a copy of the template for the poster that you have to submit as part of the final part or the formal report. So that's there available to you. So you might keep some notes in there and start thinking about what things you'll put where. So that's why that's been put there. And make sure you go to the very last page and you'll see there is a marking criteria for the logbook, which will be handed in with Part C again. So just to make that clear, the logbook will be handed in twice, okay? It will be handed in week 2 to get approval for your investigation that you're going to conduct, ensuring it's safe and feasible to do in the lab in week 4. You'll get your logbook back. You'll be able to aggregate your equipment if that's required or materials, do your experiment in week 4, keep records of what you're doing and what's happening and what modifications and changes you're making, then start to put together in week 5 or even during week 4 during class time. You might find your experiment only takes a period or 2 to do, and then you can use the rest of the time to write up your experiment and plan your poster and so on. And so then this logbook then gets submitted again in with the final part or the formal report. Okay, so just to make that clear, logbook goes in week 2, and then again with your final task. Okay, the logbook is collected as per the instructions on the pink sheet.